Dan, if you know him. You can catch him on Twitch if you're happen. I can't actually remember what his current Twitch handle is. I think it's Dan again, is it? Oh, someone put a message in chat if you are a watcher of Human streams and what he's currently going as. But for now, we're going to move on to our mental health and you presentation with the spectacular and the highly amazing Peach.
That was a beautiful intro. I don't think anyone will ever top that.
I do try. I put the efforts in sometimes. For people that are worth it. Otherwise, it's just it's just like yeah, and it's Simon.
Oh, bullseye. All right, well, thank you very much. So, hello, everybody. I hope you've been enjoying the show so far. I know I have when I've been able to pop in, especially the musical segments. I do enjoy a good musical, but I'm here today to talk about mental health. Because, well, let's put it plainly, for the last year and a half, most of us have been sat at home for the safety of ourselves and the safety of others, and it gets really bloody frustrating when everything you do is via a computer screen, because everyone has access to everyone very, very quickly, and it means your mental health can suffer. But I think first we'll take it back for a second and just explain what mental health is, because it sounds fairly simple, but everyone has mental health, whether it's good, bad, needs care, whether it's dire and needs emergency care, whether you've never experienced a mental health issue before, or whether you have a library list like me. You have mental health, just the same as you have physical health. So,
are you getting some strange noises or something?
I am, yes.
Oh, okay, well then, hold on, make sure.
I didn't know if I was interrupting someone.
No, you should be absolutely fine. There shouldn't be anything coming through to you, sorry. It's my fault.
That is not a problem at all. No, I just didn't want to interrupt anyone. So, mental health, everyone has it. And that should make sense, because the brain is a physical thing, and it's all to do with the brain, with mental stuff. So yes, that's the first thing to mention is, yes, everyone has mental health, whatever state it's in. But there is a lot of stigma and there is a lot of misunderstanding around mental health. So I'm sure at some point you will have heard, said, thought, somebody said it to you, things like, oh, boys don't cry because crying's a sign of weakness, or I'm so OCD, or, nobody will believe me if I tell them what a hard time I'm having, so I'll just say I'm fine, or it's just easier to say I'm fine, so I don't have to try and explain this, or maybe this isn't valid, maybe this isn't real, maybe I'm making it up, or I should just grin and bear it because that's what strong people do. The thing is, these sorts of thoughts come from a number of different places, but quite a few of them come from either sexism or ableism. The idea that crying is girly is bad because it's, attributed to being female, or the idea that your worth is based on your productivity and your perceived level of ability, which is ableism. So you have to kind of take those aside and look at those first to understand where everything else is coming from and why it's made mental health such a stigma to talk about. We need to try and work to break that down. I think by understanding the root that causes that stigma, we can actually start to break it down a bit further and start to understand and change how it's perceived. There is also a level of medical speak, so things like, oh, I'm so OCD. OCD is a very, very legitimate mental condition which can be absolutely debilitating for some, to the point of physical harm. But when we use it in sentences like, oh, I always like to put my pens in color order, I'm so OCD, it trivializes how difficult and dangerous the condition actually can be. And everyone starts to believe it's just much, much simpler, which means people living with severe OCD get played down a lot. So that's the first thing. Everyone has mental health. We need to actually start considering it as serious we do physical health, because if you broke your foot and couldn't walk to work, you probably wouldn't feel guilty about it. But if you're having a ridiculously bad mental health day to the point where you can't find the strength to get out of bed, you're probably still going to feel guilty because you are expected to carry on. It's not right, and mental health really needs to be considered just as much as physical health. And it is not your fault if you are feeling like crap. It is not your fault if your mental health is bad. So we're going to talk a little bit later as well, some places you can go, some people you can reach out to, and just some resources that might help you learn a little bit more, and also to address those stigmas. So I've written all this on my Ko-fi, by the way, so I can keep my my train of thought going. I live with multiple mental health conditions. I live with a form of OCD, which is the obsessive type. Basically, it is a condition called intrusive thoughts. Quite often I will end up, when I'm in a low point, with like a little voice in the back of my head saying nasty things, but over and over. And it's not just the kind of the, oh, you look fat, and then it goes away type thing. It will go like that for days and days and days and stop sleep. And it gets very serious. So that's what I mean when trivializing a condition can make it very difficult for people with that condition to come forward and talk about it because it gets downplayed. I also live with a suspected ADHD, which is why I need lots of notes. Otherwise, I tangent for days and just go off, and I'll end up talking about zoos or something like that instead. And I also live with diagnosed chronic depression, which I was diagnosed with when I was 17, which I was diagnosed with because I displayed anger, not because I displayed any kind of sadness or any kind of lethargy. It's because I was just very, very quick to anger. So depression looks different for lots of different types of people as well. The reason I bring up exactly what I live with is hopefully by us talking about it a little bit more and being honest, it opens up honest conversations for other people as well. So what we can do to talk about mental health properly, initially, it starts with you. You have to look inside yourself, look at how you are feeling, and taking time to understand that it might suck and it might be really difficult, but it is legitimate, and it is a legitimate issue. It is a health issue, even if it isn't physically tangible. You don't need to be able to point to the hurt to know that you do have it. And mental health and mental strife can be even more dangerous than a physical issue, because at least you know how to treat that immediately. Mental health can be a lot more insidious. So yes, talking really does help. It's the old, saying of a problem shared is a problem halved. And it does sound silly, but if you're carrying all this weight on yourself, if you can piece off a tiny part of it and give it to somebody else who maybe has the tools to deal with it, you're suddenly carrying less. And that person might be able to carry part for you and help you manage it and eventually give it back, but a lot lighter with a lot more information. So I often see people trying to reach out about mental health, not wanting to burden others. That comes under what we can do to talk about it properly. Ask. If you really need to talk to somebody, just ask if you can talk to them. Because if they say yes, they already know that they're having to put aside that mental energy, that they're having to put, a bit more care into how they're thinking, feeling, speaking to be able to support you. If they say no, then they're probably dealing with it themselves as well. So try and lessen the guilt you feel. Don't stop and not go forward with talking because of feeling guilt. Just ask whether it's okay. It's just asking, even if it's your best friend, just saying, hey, do you have enough energy for me to talk about some mental health stuff? And there you go. You've immediately gotten permission, and then they can help. So definitely understanding how you feel and how you feel about mental health will really help us to talk about it better as a society. But I would also say, look inside yourself as well. And this goes for me, because I've had to do this to try and understand and figure out if you have any discomfort with mental health, if you have any sort of internalized ideas that, you shouldn't talk about mental health because it's shameful, or because, you were raised that, don't cry because that's weak. Like, you got to look inside yourself and address these things. And if you don't find them to be true, you can change that. You can stand up and say, actually, no, that's not how I want to think anymore. I want to be more open with this. I want to understand myself better. Because once you do that, it gives you so much more room to empathize and understand other people. And yes, I learned this next line from my friend Olivia, and I absolutely love it. But we are all born ignorant, and you can't be blamed for what you don't know. But it is on you if you are given the opportunity to learn and change, and instead you refuse and decide to stick to what you think. Because if you're being given more information, take that on board and try and incorporate it to what you already know. Because yes, you can't be blamed for what you don't know, but you can learn. I would also say that, and I don't know if anyone listening to this today is a manager or a boss or a CEO or somebody who is in charge of employees, I would call upon you to take this conversation seriously as well. Often in employment, in all the various jobs I've worked, if I needed a mental health day with the conditions I have, I never called in for one. I called in with vomiting or a severe migraine because those were things that people understood and wouldn't question. But if I ever called up saying I need a mental health day, you would get people asking, well, is it actually that bad? Or could you just come in for 4 hours? Or, could you just buck up and deal with it? And no, you wouldn't be asked to walk on a broken leg. You should not be asked to try and function with severe mental distress. So if you are in charge of employees, look in yourself as well and see how you feel about mental health, check what your work guidelines are, and then try and actually let your employees know that mental health is a reason they can take sick days and that they can trust you with that. Because otherwise you're going to see a hell of a lot more migraines and vomiting cases than actually exist. And it's because people feel afraid to actually admit they need help because they don't think they'll be believed. That's essentially where I'm at with what we can do to talk about it properly, is just look in yourself and understand it, and understand it is as difficult as a physical injury, because it is a physical part. It just doesn't show externally. There is also a link between physical and mental health. So I also live with a condition called fibromyalgia, which causes pressure points all over the body to feel like bruises just randomly out of nowhere, causes random stabbing pains, causes joint and muscular pain. It causes issues with all my various organs and my skin. Everything gets a bit buggered by it. But when that flares up, my mental health goes down. And that's because the body and the brain are obviously one and the same. And so physical and mental health are linked. So if one is suffering, the other usually suffers. It's why you'll probably notice when you have, like a flu, or if you've had COVID or something like that, you've probably felt mentally like crap as well. And that's okay. It's legitimate. It's actually been realized because most people with a chronic condition or the disability will also be diagnosed with depression or anxiety or something along those lines, or with needing help with mental health. And if your mental health suffers, your physical health suffers more, because as Nick has just said in the chat, when your mental health suffers, you may not have the energy to eat, which then may cause you to lose weight. And if you're not needing to lose any, or if you're starting to lose it suddenly, that can be incredibly dangerous for you, or it can lead to binging and sudden weight gain, which is what I deal with, which I'm not really afraid to talk about anymore. But when we talk about these things and we understand that they can affect each other, we realize how important it is to look after our mental health. The same as you wouldn't let an open wound fester, you shouldn't just let mental health issues fester. So yes, I understand a lot of it is guilt as well, but hopefully if you've looked inside yourself and realized how you feel about it, you'll realize that that guilt is other people's problem, not yours. You're perceiving how other people may respond to you. That's their problem. How you deal with yourself is your problem. And hopefully when we all work together, we'll start to make it not so much of a problem. So there are lots of tools online, because that's the main part I want to talk about today, is what tools you can use online to help with your mental health. I will talk about a couple of triggering things here, just so everyone is aware. Things mostly like gambling. So if anyone, oh goodness, if anyone doesn't want to hear about those things, this is just a quick warning, they'll be coming up. But yes, many of us over the last year and a half have spent just loads of time at home, working from home, socializing at home on our computers, or texting or having to call people and not really going out and seeing anyone in person. And this can bring a lot of challenges because although the internet is asynchronous, so we don't need to be like looking at each other face to face and like immediately responding, it often does feel like you need to, which causes issues in itself because you feel like you always have to be online. But there are a number of tools that you can use. There's also been a lot of people doing what's called doom scrolling, which is where there's so much horrible things going on in the world that you read and you scroll and you read and you scroll and you read, and then you click another one and you read and you scroll and you keep going to take in all this information for many, many, many reasons. It could be for, like mine, I always feel guilty if I don't know what's going on because maybe I could help. But you can't help if you have nothing left to give. You have to make sure that you have something in your cup to be able to pour. If you don't have anything left to give, you start taking from yourself and eventually you'll have nothing left of you. So it's identifying patterns like that will really help online. If you are having serious issues with it, you can use various tools to limit actually how long you can access websites for if you feel it needs to be that severe. How, if you need to only be allowed to look at Twitter 30 minutes a day, it can then lock it for you afterwards and say, you don't have access to this any longer. You've used up your allotment. If you don't need anything so serious, there are things to do like muting. So on Twitter and I believe on Facebook and possibly Instagram, you can mute specific terms. So if you didn't want to see the term ducks, you could block ducks and you could block ducklings as well. And any post that contained the word duck or duckling wouldn't show up any longer. Or it might say, this post is hidden because you have muted a word in it. And then it's up to you whether you want to view it or not. So you can do that if there's something that you find really difficult to talk about at the minute or something you're just sick of seeing, you can do things like that. You can also block individuals. This goes for in-game as well, but I have a specific list for other things you can do in-game. You can block individuals to stop them being able to access you and your profiles and posts. Pretty standard, that one. Reporting as well. If somebody is being just a complete idiot, you can report them if you want to take the time. Be aware that doing that generally means you have to trawl their posts to find the ones that you want to report. So it's not particularly fun. But if somebody is being harassing or is attacking you, you can report them. Push notifications are also something I don't tend to see people talking about when it comes to mental health, but the ability and the want to always be online and always be communicating, especially at the minute, can lead to a lot of burnout. And push notifications are one of the most insidious bloody things that you can get. So when you go onto a website, it usually comes up with a thing in the top saying, do you want to get notifications from this website? And sometimes you'll just click yes, or you'll get it on your phone as well. It's like, do you want me to tell you when you get a DM on Facebook? And you say yes. But then that means every single time a thing happens online that may interest you, you get things spammed, you get messages on your phone, you'll get ringing alerts, you'll get a message on your computer. If you have an iPad somewhere, that will start ringing and that won't leave you alone. And then your watch will, it gets too much. It gets too much. So if you have a look on your browser, you can turn those alerts off. You can turn them off on your phone. You can set them to a do not disturb during X hours and Y hours. So have them all off during the weekend, especially while you're asleep. Make sure it doesn't just start ringing while you're asleep. You don't need that. But you can turn off those kinds of things to help you get away from social media for longer. If it's an emergency, somebody will call you. They won't tweet you. So you can do things like that to help out. Games offer very similar things. Obviously, a lot of us here watching today have a couple of games in common. So I'm talking mostly about things that link to MMOs or games with large social aspects. But muting, again, is another thing you can do, stopping a player's voice or chat messages being delivered to you. Blocking, again, stopping them from accessing you in game. You also have access to profanity filters in games, and that may work if you're playing a game around small people or people that shouldn't be dealing with naughty words. So you can turn that off for chat as well, so it'll just get starred out. reporting is the same, push notifications are the same, but especially for mobile games, and especially if you have a little bit of an issue with spending, just it's just a microtransaction here, it's just a little purchase there, oh, it's just this box of something here, it's just this loot box there. Push notifications will always be trying to get you to spend money, and every time they tell you to come back to the game, it will serve you an ad and it will try and get you to spend something. So turning those push notifications off for a game that you may just want to check out every now and then, turning those off can be really, really helpful, especially if you are trying to deal with something like gambling. You can also set payment blocks on a lot of different games, and on especially a lot of mobile games. It will be hidden in the settings. It will be a little tiny button, but you can turn off microtransactions and loot boxes most of the time. Or it will just basically say they're there, but you have a lock saying you cannot spend without a specific password. So if you are struggling with mental health, in that you may be having obsessive, sort of thoughts, you may be spending too much, or you may just be prone to just sort of spaffing money, then you may want to actually limit those to help you control those urges. With social media being asynchronous as well, again, so that's you being able to post something and an hour later somebody can respond to it. It doesn't need to be immediate. Try and take that time to actually say what you mean. You don't need to respond to people immediately. You can take that time to write something and then put it down for a second and then read it back and go, oh God, no, actually I'm being an ass right now. I'll delete that. I'll start again. Because it is quite easy when we're all stressed and getting frustrated with how the current world situation is, to lash out in another direction. And lashing out online, it often feels, it can feel like a gotcha, you've told somebody off, hey, you've done a good thing, but then all you've done is put out some negativity that's not actually going to get a conversation going, not actually going to start a discussion or actually going to teach anyone anything. And you may just find out you are lashing out and sending out the wrong thing. So take the time to look back at what you're actually saying. Also, remember the delete button is there. If you do say something stupid, you can just delete it. And remember, any feedback you make, any criticism you give, whether it's to a game or whether it's to another person, try and make sure your feedback is constructive and not destructive. If you're trying to tear something down, you are not helping. If you are trying to improve something, or you're trying to assist or give feedback, try and make sure it's in a way that actually makes people want to take it on. Again, I'm not going to go into this fully, but I do see this a lot, especially in the way that people respond to game developers and gaming accounts online. I wrote a whole Ko-fi post about that. You need to remember there's people on the ends of every account. And so try and make sure you're actually talking to people as though they are actually people. So the last thing I wanted to mention that I have written up is resources and charities. There's quite a few that I really like, and there's a lot for different groups. And then if anyone does have any questions I can fit in before the end, do feel free to let me know. But there's loads of resources online. So I think I wrote 5 or so down. The first one I think is brilliant is Safe in Our World, which is a mental health awareness website for gamers specifically, which is pretty cool. So it's full of like articles, stories, and lots of like easy to digest information. So it's not like huge blocks of text everywhere, but it includes lists of games that tackle the subject of mental health. So Stardew Valley has a storyline about alcoholism. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of all the others. It's probably better I just send you to the website. Safe in Our World has a massive, massive list of games that deal with mental health. So if you're trying to find out about a specific sort of condition, you can probably find a game that talks about it in a more sort of inclusive way. The next website is one that I've done some fundraising for recently, which is Mind Out LGBTQ, which is an LGBTQIA plus mental health service. And you may think, well, why does the LGBT community require a specific mental health service? And that's because there's a lot of sort of conditions or thought patterns or issues that may arise within the LGBT community that don't arise elsewhere. And so having a specific service for LGBTQIA plus people is absolutely fantastic. They've got loads of things like posters, leaflets, resources. They have an LGBTQIA plus run live chat service. So you know you're going to be talking to somebody like you who has similar experience. They also have a leave this website quickly button, which I think is incredible. Not many places do. But if you are browsing the website for help and maybe your family aren't as accepting and you need to be able to hide it quickly, there is a button that you press and it closes the website and opens a second Google page to completely cover up what you were looking at. So it makes it a lot safer to read about these topics if you're in an unsafe environment. Mind as well is one that's more geared towards adults, but they also have a children and young adults section for 11 to 18 to open up conversations about mental health in maybe a more age-appropriate way, maybe with more age-appropriate language, but they are one of the UK's biggest mental health charities, so they help with a lot of funding and they have a lot more resources to do sort of in a more medical way than some of the others, which are a lot more emotive. So if you're wanting more sort of specific, to the point information, then Mind might be really good to go to. And another one for gamers is checkpointorg.com, not checkpoint.org, that's a different website, checkpointorg.com, which has more support for the gaming communities. And so it has a support section that has gaming conventions, it has mental health and gaming streams, and a list of global support resources so you can get help wherever you are in the world. It's completely global, all the list of resources that they have. So those are some of my favorites. They're all really good websites. They're all really easy to browse. And they are helpful because even if you don't live with ill mental health yourself, it can help a lot to be able to recognize it and assist others with it. So that's everything I have written down basically, and all my basic notes on that. But if anyone has questions, I've got a few minutes, I'll be happy to answer them. I would just drink first.
Thank you very much, Paige. There's been a lot of discussions and people giving you huge props and love for coming on, and I really appreciate it as well. And I think one of the things that, from my own personal experience of dealing with people who have got issues in mental health and various different factors, is that it does have an effect on your mental health, and you then get into a situation where you feel that there's a mental health top trumps going on, as whose overrides whose, and you made a very, very poignant point about how if your cup's not got enough in it to give, then it's time for you to start treating yourself and looking at yourself from a mental health point of view, so that you can fill that cup.
Make your microphone's on again.
That's all right. You didn't have to say, you should have typed it and then I could have fixed it, because nobody out there can hear it being bad. Only you. Paige has to listen to my horrendous crackling audio.
Don't you worry. I'm a professional, but yes, you've got to make sure your own cup is full. And because otherwise you end up just giving away parts of yourself that you can't afford to give away, and that doesn't help anybody.
So yes, if you're out there and you are struggling because you are a carer for someone with mental health issues, then bear in mind this advice is not just for the people you care for, it's for you as well. It's your mental health that you have to look after, because you can't look after someone else. If you are suffering, it only leads to the ultimate crisis point that will come when you least expect it, and over the most mundane thing you can possibly imagine, as much as just someone and their alarm goes off a little bit earlier than anticipated. It can be such a small thing, so do look after yourself. Right, let's have a look and see. We've got loads of people just sharing their particular issues and talking about it, which is always good to be able to speak and say it without feeling that people are going to judge you. So you're welcome to share your thoughts here. Yeah.
So there's a comment I see here from Lord Shalty saying, where do you stand on on using organisations you don't like on Facebook as somewhere to vent anger? Don't do that. Don't do that. They're not somebody you're actually angry with. So why would you take your anger and direct it to somebody who did absolutely nothing to deserve it? And also, just don't shout at people on the internet. There's real people behind every single account. And I say that as somebody who, one of the reasons I left the games industry was over harassment. It has a real human cost. Even though you think you're just shouting into the ether or onto an organizational page, there is still somebody that has to run that page. Even if they deserve it, even if they deserve your anger, they don't deserve your vitriol. And there are ways that you can get in touch with the company that will actually get you help instead of just hurting a social media manager.
I'm just having a look and see if we've got any more questions anywhere, even from the rest of the Zoom call. If you want to unmute yourself and ask, then please do. I can see I got a message from Lennon telling me to kick my potato. Oh, someone was asking actually if you were basically qualified in other ways other than extensive experience. I don't know if you have any sort of particular qualifications you want to share.
So the only qualification I have is a mental health first aid certificate, which I got to go alongside my physical first aid certificates, because there's been times where I've had to deal with mental health crises, not for myself, but with other people. And so it pushed me to go and actually get qualified and being able to assist with recognizing danger patterns and essentially immediate care for essentially people trying to commit suicide.
Yeah, well, I've just seen, we do have a question from Nick, and it's, and I think this is kind of a question, and I think I can answer from another point of view as well, but what was your experience with the NHS mental health service? It's different everywhere, and it definitely is, but what was your particular experiences in accessing them and the quality of support?
Lacking. Definitely lacking. So I got my diagnosis very easily. Essentially, most of the conditions I've been diagnosed with, I have family history going back generations with. So when I first went to my doctor to talk about depression and mental health, it was very clear to see where it had come from. So that was an easy diagnosis, essentially. But trying to get access to therapy, trying to get access to any kind of support has been incredibly difficult, and essentially just ended up going private. It was not easy at all to get support, which is why I think looking into other support networks, other support websites, and advocacy services are probably the best thing you can do. Because one thing you will struggle to do with problems with mental health is be able to actually stand up and objectively say, I need this help and this is how difficult things are. Getting an external view, so an advocate, somebody to work with you, can really help wonders when you actually go to a doctor, somebody that can say, I have observed this, here are my notes, from a professional capacity. And they will often come from charities as well. So you do not need to pay for said service. You'll need to be assessed for them. But yes, looking into getting assistance elsewhere, I think, is a good idea if you find that you've not been able to get help on the NHS.
Yeah, the advocacy projects that if you can get access and they operate in your area, it's having someone who knows the system, knows how to get what you need from that system and the way to get it, and to make sure that you don't get brushed aside in red tape and jargon, because that can happen. And your social work service in your local area will have its own local budget, so that's a constraint you have to deal with. And I don't know, from my experience recently as well, certainly in this pandemic, the mental health services at your A&E departments are practically non-existent. And having had 2 late night treks to try and deal with drug overdoses, you find that there's no help there. And you're going through crisis points, and the points leading up to these particular issues, you cannot get the help at that point. And that's why it's so important to arm yourself with as many avenues so that you've got somewhere that you can go if you're lacking family or support from that point of view, or you just don't want to bother them, which I think is one of those things. It's a shame because people would rather be bothered than find you that you've hurt yourself.
Yes.
Then do get these things. I think there's breathing spaces, another one. I think there's an online counselling service that was recently launched as well during the pandemic to help people, and use them. Just don't wait until you really are climbing the walls and absolutely don't know what to do. Do it when you're feeling the rough and get the help in early, and it'll save an awful lot of hassle. But NHS is a last resort. It's there for those dire situations, and unfortunately, it's not the service that you need. And if you're not sure what's available in your area, just look for your local carers centre and talk to them. Those people will find your access for whatever you need and are brilliant. And that's from my experience. I don't know about about you, Paige, but carer centres are the absolute most amazing people who are familiar with how things work in your local area and often can be the gateway to find the services that you never knew existed.
Exactly. You don't want to wait until breaking point to try and get that assistance, because you may end up not knowing where to turn and something may go wrong. It's when you notice, or when you first think, maybe I should get some help, but that's the point you need to get some help. That's not the point to think, well, I'll wait a week. No, the point that you think that is the point to act on it. Even if you think you're bothering someone, even if you're not sure if it's worth it, because it's better to have reached out and gone, oh, sorry to bother you, I'll come back later, than get to the point you need help and you can't get any.
So I'm just trying to see. I'm not even sure. I'm not sure if it's a genuine. Again, they made comments, and I'm not entirely certain that we have a genuine person. But there is a point that is what happens when this external help leads to harm for lifestyle and family. Yeah, there's always a cost. That's the point that Paige made earlier on. Is if you haven't got it to give, you can't give it. If it has a negative effect on your existence, it's either to the cost of what you need to do in order to keep somebody safe, well, and help them on the road to recovery, or to recover to a point that they can get to where life becomes bearable and enjoyable. Bearable is a horrible word. Enjoyable for people, because life is meant to be fun. It's meant to be enjoyable.
Yeah, so this person who's writing seems to have an idea that there's an ultimatum involved. There's no ultimatum. If somebody's mental health is forcing an ultimatum, then yes, trying to get some help on that situation is going to be needed. I can't comment when it comes to things like child protective services or any specific situations. I can only really talk about your mental health and mental health stuff that I have experienced. But if something is affecting other people, if mental health is affecting other people in your family, and it's your mental health that's causing that, you need to try and reach out to get some help for you, because that will only positively affect other people. There are also things like group counseling sessions or family therapy sessions. If somebody's mental health has also affected others in the family, you need to all talk about it. There are situations like that, but emergency situations, that does come down to emergency NHS, government, local council, that kind of thing.
There's a question in the chat saying, how can we exercise our mental health? Is there things we can do to improve?
Definitely. There's definitely ways to exercise your mental health. It really depends what state you're in and what you feel comfortable with. There is a lot of stuff like mindfulness, which doesn't work for everyone. Some people think it's silly, but some people do find a lot of help taking 5 minutes of meditation every single day. Some people find it helpful to just write down an affirmation every single day. So you just on a scrap of paper, just writing out, I really like how my shoes look today. It's just a nice thing to actually affirm to yourself. Just one thing every single day that you are happy or pleased about, something to look back on and reflect that is positive. You can also look at things like podcasts or mental health streams if you're wanting to sort of hear from others and learn and be able to reflect upon yourself. There's lots of ways to exercise it, but I think it's looking for something in yourself that you enjoy or that you think you would like to hear, and then trying to act on that a little bit every day, instead of trying to look for, this is really going bad, what can I do to fix it? That's the point. You need to reach out to others, because it's past the point where you can just buoy it up yourself.
And I think Ben had a quick. Ben, are you in chat anyway? You could ask it yourself, couldn't you?
I am and I can, but I didn't want to dive in either. I was just wondering if there's any ideas on if there's somebody that you're really worried about who has mental health issues and they won't even accept the fact that they need help. Is there anything you can do?
Yeah. At that point, it really depends on how serious it is. And there will be, I'll trigger warnings for mentions of suicide here. I'll mention that before I continue speaking. The thing to do is just ask them. and to ask them very, very plainly. If you are worried that somebody is going to need serious help, and I'm going to use the idea of suicide as an example, you need to be able to ask them that question. You have to go to them and say, I'm really concerned. Have you had thoughts of suicide? Do you have a plan? Do you have the tools to do so? Do you have whatever you would need to take, like, to go through with your plan? What is your level of mental health? If they still say they don't need any help at all, there's not a ton you can do. You can't lead the horse to water and force it to drink. You can't. But you could then, if you needed to, if they had another close friend who they might open up to, you could say, hey, I'm worried about this person, but they won't open up to me. I didn't know if you could help. Again, if it's, a family member, you could reach out to another family member who's closer. Unfortunately, there's no guarantee that you yourself are going to be able to help, but the most important thing you can do is to not sort of bat around the situation and not try to just not try to poke at it. You need to just break down that wall, and you need to ask the question very seriously, because anyone that is going through that serious kind of mental strife is not going to respond to sort of fluffy little questions. They're going to need to get direct and to the point. And if they do answer yes to any of the questions, then that's the point to be like, okay, we need immediate assistance right now. Or, okay, you're planning on doing something to yourself and you say you have pain medication. I need that pain medication. You need to give that to me. I need to take that away from you. And then we need to get you some help. You need to remove the threat. Same as any other first aid situation where you immediately first assess and remove the threat to the person, you need to do the same.
Fantastic. Hopefully you can hear me okay now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think it's probably a good point to wrap it up, as when you start to see that you just come round and round in circles, and how vast the mental health issues spread across everyday life. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your advice. We've put links to your blog and your post so that people can come and see this article, read it for themselves, and again find the links. And so remember, guys, the first thing is being able to talk about these things without fear of judgment is key. So a little bit of understanding goes a long way. And thank you, Paige, for helping people here who may well be feeling that this time has been tough on them, and they didn't really even think that possibly there was something they could just have a wee chat with somebody, and it can help them find out that maybe they need a little bit more help than they thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for having me. The last thing I will just mention is something Osric reminded me of, is that I run a series called the Through Our Eyes streams, which is where I get panels of marginalized people together to talk about situations and things like this. I have the next one coming up this month on the 24th, which is a look into health. And that's health as a whole. It's going to feature some people you already know, but we will be discussing mental health with people who have lived experience with a variety of conditions. So we'll be speaking about that on the 24th.
Brilliant. Okay, we will go back and we will see you. We'll go back to the program. Is there anyone else in chat? Anything else before we wrap up? Is everyone good? I think everyone's good, Paige. I think you've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much again. It's always great to see you as well.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Let's get back to the program. Here we go, and we will see what's up next. Next, we have the Writing Audio Experiences panel at 1:00. So, time for a cup of tea if you've got a chance, or even, crikey, possibly even make a sandwich if you're quick, if you're skilled enough, which I'm not. So let's come back at 1.